Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Logical, Plausible, Probable. I'm your host, John Maddox, and tonight we're having another stream you just won't want to miss. If you got what it takes, click that link. But prepare yourself, for this arena is not for the weak. Now, let the mental combat begin. But always make sure your arguments are LPP.
Greetings, everybody. Welcome to a impromptu after show. Didn't even know that debate was happening over on SFT between Kent and Planarwalk over in the Evolution on Trial series. But hey, I got a few minutes, not long, but a little bit of time. So hey, let's cram in an after show, have a fun one. So here we are. If you want to join the stream, link is in the side chat. If this is your first time, because I know there's a lot of folks that were watching over on Planarwalk's channel. So if any of you are coming over here, how we do the after shows is people to join the panel, kind of each get 45 seconds to a minute or so to kind of air your thoughts about the debate, best one-liners, best comebacks, overall thoughts, who you thought won, lost, all those kind of fun things, and then we'll go on to the next person. And then if nobody news in, then we'll kind of go into general discussion, can talk about different topics, things that we're discussing in the debate, or other things that come up. But then as new folks join the panel, we will then kind of go in timeout real quick, allow them, the new person, to air their thoughts about the debate, and then we can go back to the general conversation that was ongoing. So if you want to join, link is pinned in the side chat, and we'll get things going when people start joining. Big shout out to the one and only Doki Bible Club. Appreciate you very much. I won't get into it too much. Let's just say I was my mouth fell open the other day. I got an email from notification, and let's just say that Doki was being very generous. So thank you very much, Doki. And as usual, he's going crazy with the super sticker addiction. I think because he's been gone for a while, I think that Doki must have finally gone through the appropriate amount of therapy for all of his super sticker addiction on YouTube. But he's recovered now and is able to control it, so he's back here, and he's greatly appreciated as always. We got Alec Cox in the house. I think I saw CJ. We got Jonathan Prime. Luca's here. What's going on? Modal Groove. Cheryl. What's up, Cheryl? How you doing? Awesome member, Cheryl there. How are you? We got John Tuin is here. Dustin Buck. What's up, Dustin? How you doing? Hurricane Havoc's here, so hopefully we'll get some good conversation. And I tell you this one guy that I've been trying to figure out what his beef is with me. We've got this dude boot the door and shout through the crack. He's been keeps going on saying more voice fry. And he said that about me over on SFT's channel as well. I'm really not sure does anybody know what voice fry means? I'm not following that exactly. I don't know what that means, but anyway. What's up, Ravi? Oh, the one only standing for truth is here. What's going on, Standing? How you doing? Great debate. I'm glad that was able to happen. It'll be interesting to see more. Doki started doing super stickers again. It'll be interesting to see the response to that one, because I was rather fascinated by, the dude has 20 something thousand subscribers. There were 500 people over on his channel watching the stream, and I just didn't feel like Nick had much. Like his arguments were pretty weak, I thought. And the fact that he was continuing to go on, okay, sidebar. The fact that the Evo atheists on YouTube continue to, in perpetuity, it seems, rely on the micro changes over extended periods of time, yada, yada. Like that, that whole concept is just being obliterated under the modern research in relation to oh, holy crap, we just saw this thing do a major rewrite of a portion of the code, or reorganization of the code, or the activation of different portions of the genome that immediately activate this function that we didn't see before, and now it's doing it. We watched it in real time. And then flip over to one of these debates on YouTube, and it's, these very micro changes, and they each had shorter arms, and the next one had shorter arms, and then another arm formed, and all these kind of things. I'm just like, what? The level of imagination that is necessary for these positions to be defended really fascinates me. It's so intriguing listening to these folks, and I think the opponent today was the epitome of this, because when he'd go on these long expositions to defend his position, it was like he flipped over into the creative sci-fi writer part of his brain, and then was doing all that but not actually analyzing critically the validity or the plausibility of the position that was being taken. So it's kind of interesting there. Seriously, what's up, James? How you doing? Welcome to the stream. What's on your mind? I saw you over in the debate. So what are your thoughts?
I got kind of sidetracked toward the end there, witnessing to that one guy. Need to pray for that guy. Blaming God for all of the problems in his life instead of blaming sin and his parents and all that stuff. But anyways, Dr. Hovind uses science again to debunk the silliness of evolution and the lack of evidence that they have, constantly going back to their statement of faith of looking at fossils and saying that there are what do they call that, common ancestors, because they look at a rock. But that's what I got from it. Anyways, I don't know, can you hear me?
Yeah, yeah, we hear you just fine. I was just letting you have your time. It's good points. I mean, he definitely was. There was a lot of logic that was put forth. Whoa, we got some beeps here. Okay, let's see. Ghostman, what's up? Welcome to the stream. How you doing?
All right.
Did you see the debate? If so, what'd you think?
It was all right. I've seen all his debates. Not all, but his later ones. They're good.
Right on. Is there anything about today's debate that you stuck out to you? Like, do you think it was a win? Who won? Who lost? Any like particular topics that really stuck out to you, or just kind of general overview of what you thought about it?
I've seen it. It's pretty good. Kent, I think.
Yeah, Kent is his name.
He won.
Yeah, it looked to me like Dr. Hovind won. That's what it looked like to me.
Yeah, it was definitely an interesting. What I found interesting is the amount of attempts to not answer the point or to actually defend his own position. Right. There was that whole segment of what's your definition of kind, and I'm like, what is Kent's definition of kind have to do with whether or not evolution is true? Like, it's like there was a flip-flop of like who is defending what here, which always fascinates me because the atheists always want the theist or the person who's against evolution, right, to defend their position, right? But then when the roles get reversed, they still want you to have to defend your position versus like understanding that, hey, the burden of proof just switched.
Yeah.
It's now your turn. It's your turn now. Like, rise to the occasion. Oh, wait, you can't because your own position is so freaking weak and you just, all you can do is like do talking points and then that's it. And then there's implosion. It's incredible. Okay, real quick. CJ is up next. What's up, man? Welcome to the stream. Did you catch the debate? What's your thoughts on it?
Yeah, thank you for having me again. Love having these after shows. So I do have to go back and rewatch because unfortunately I only caught the tail end of it. But there was, even with that, a couple things I found a little noteworthy. The first one just being, I don't understand this modern secular concept of science doesn't prove things. Science only demonstrates things to the best reasonability or something like that. Because it just, now granted, not a scientist, right? So maybe I'm speaking ignorantly here, but it seems to me like it's just patently false. Like I can prove elephants exist, that they're mammalian, that they produce by sexual reproduction, that they lactate, that they have hair, that they live in Africa. And all of those things can be proved definitively using science. In other words, proved to such an extent that you can't, there's no 99.9999999%, right? It's 100%. We know elephants exist. We know that they are, such and such a weight and have hair on their body and are mammalian and etc. And it just seems like a really bizarre argument to me to say science doesn't prove things, because it's I don't know. it is completely contrary to what I observe in my day-to-day life, right? And not even just, that was like biological facts, but astronomical facts as well. Can we prove that deep space exists? Well, yeah. Can we prove that stars are out there? Yeah.
But what gets me about that, science doesn't prove things that the evolutionists use, but then they go ahead and they say science has proved evolution.
Right. Exactly. It's like you can't. It's almost like you're speaking out of both ends of your mouth there. It doesn't work.
Exactly.
The other thing that I found interesting, I don't know if this was something he brought up or if I saw it in the live chat, but there was a comparison made of evolution to linguistic evolution. There wasn't a sort of point in time where English as we know it came to be. Rather, it kind of grows over time out of Old English, which grows out of other Anglo-Saxon languages and so on and so forth. And I actually thought that was a decent argument until I realized the fundamental flaw of it is that we were already speaking to each other. So, like, for example, if I come up here and I use some kind of a slang term, like, for example, I think he's from New Zealand, called him Kiwi. And then 100 years down the road, that's just the word that's used to refer to, let's make it large and say islanders. People from islands are referred to as Kiwis. It's like expanded beyond its semantical range of just somebody from New Zealand. That is an example of what you would expect as an evolutionist, except the language that I'm using already exists. So it seems to me like in order for that to happen, you would have to have at least a a base platform, a foundation of biological life forms. And so I don't know. It was an interesting argument. I admit it was probably one of the better ones I've heard from an evolutionist, but I still think it runs into the abiogenesis problem.
No,
I think it's
so
much
the
worse
so,
than that. Oh, go
so
ahead.
the evolutionists love to use linguistics to somehow support their position. But in line with what to expand upon what you were saying there, CJ, is any expansion of linguistics necessitates a preceding intelligent agent that has a complete communication system, which has, and cognition, obviously in this context as well, with the capacity for expansion of the alphabet that is being used as for that communication, right? Whether that in the signals that are being used for it, right? So this is where what he was actually referring to is signal theory, which they love to. You guys, people who on the show or listen to a lot of these shows have heard me rant about this. They love to claim that signal theory, which is the expansion of these communication methods, is somehow proof of evolution from their perspective, when it is not. It's actually evidence in our favor that you must have a complete communication system and a preceding intelligent agent. Because, like, one example I like to use is, gazelles or whatever, they jump really high to indicate to lions that the ones that jump the highest are the fastest and are going to be able to get away. Therefore, the lion recognizes this and goes and kills the weak one. Oh, therefore, you communicate, the language is expanded between the two. And it's like, so you have a complete freaking gazelle and a complete lion. What do you mean that proves evolution? That's dumb. That means you're ignorant of communication theory and basic common sense. And it drives me up the wall. Anyway, we'll get back to that in a second. Alex, welcome to the stream. How you doing? Long time. How's everything going? What did you think about the debate? Alec, you with us? You're on mute, buddy, if you're talking. Oh, Alec must have had to step away. James had to bounce. What's up, James? Appreciate you. Thanks for joining the stream. Have a good one. So I think, Ghostman, did you have something you were wanting to interject before I started talking in response to CJ?
Oh, heard a couple, like this one video time I saw you on a Brett King show. On the end, you're talking to this one weird Australian guy who doesn't seem want to hear what you have to say. Who was that guy?
Australian guy. Was it Pete Tucker, maybe?
He said he muted you with his technology.
Oh, oh yeah. That is Beamsy. Beamsy. Yeah.
He said he was blown up once or something. I don't know. Have you ever talked to him again?
I don't think I've talked to him since that point, because that wasn't that long ago. But he still hasn't recovered from my obliteration of his supposed debunking of me. So
yeah, remember the Zetter debate you had where you debated godness engineer?
Yeah, I debated him too. Yep.
It doesn't matter how much proof you show him, he doesn't believe DNA is a code.
Well, you're right, but this goes back to my point that, what CJ and I were talking about is that the second you concede that a complete communication system and source code is necessary for life to exist, you're left with two choices. Either one, you have to go with the common sense, intuitive and rational and logical realization that an intelligent agent is necessary, or you have to suspend critical thinking and actual, plausibility. And, well, I know that it's really not rational for me to conclude that ASCII could create itself, and then somehow ASCII could be used to create PHP, and then after PHP exists, then you can create the original Facebook without a coder being necessary. Like, that's what it boils down to. That's where they're at. You have those choices. Either all that stuff can create itself, or the intelligent agent is necessary. I mean, this is what has stuck out to me since my very first debate I ever did on YouTube with James Downard. It's proven by this.
The intricacies of our DNA code. Are you concluding that the equivalent of Google, Facebook, Twitter, Snapchat, and everything else could come into existence by chance without an intelligent designer?
I suspect so, but again, that's an origins or bust question, which is not what I was asked to discuss. I want to get back to some things where I can figure out where you stand on other things. Let's talk about the Cambrian explosion. Are you contending?
Wow.
So I mean, that's kind of the proof of my point. And I've heard that same kind of. I've asked that question to multiple other folks in debates and in conversations like this one, and they all, well, it could, or there's like, well, no, but we're not talking about that kind of thing. And it's like, well, no, actually, we are talking about the exact same thing. In fact, we're actually talking about the necessity of something that's way more advanced than PHP, or the things, programs are going to be created with PHP. Like that's where we're at. And this is why I think that the Evo atheists on YouTube especially are desperate to remain ignorant. They don't go and research things for themselves, because if they do, their entire worldview will implode. Okay, real quick, I think Alec, did you say your audio is working now? Are you with us?
Yeah, audio is back on. I had the YouTube on. I turned that off, and then whatever. I had to revert back to my my Note 21. So the other one curbed. It didn't last. It didn't evolve back into a better phone. Anyway, yeah. So evolutionists still try to do the bunny hop in the pea patch with all their given enough time, given enough space, given enough letters, given enough this, given enough this. Anything can happen. Some guy named Yonker in the chat said, "Oh yeah, the Galapagos finches. Yeah, they're still finches. They still reproduce with each other. The only thing that changes is their beak size, depending on what season it is. And yeah, they're still finches. It's a no win for Darwin on that. They didn't turn into a pterodactyl. They didn't get a larger dongle so they could man around everywhere. And so evolution is dead. The only reason it's kept alive is because the amount of money that's put into academia with textbooks and everything else. I can go on for years with it, but it's the biggest scam since Caesar said he was God.
I would have to agree with. I would actually argue that it's bigger because it's.
Oh, I would have gone there. But I just didn't want to waste 2 hours of your time talking about that crap.
No. I'm just saying. I would argue that. And I know we agree, but I'm saying I would argue that the premise of evolution in the modern interpretation of it being reality has enabled not just one, but an innumerable number of cons to be pulled off, whether if in all sorts of aspects of academia, general society at large. I mean, it's truly astonishing to me how people don't seem to grasp how it is leveraged to such extremes in order to manipulate the masses. I mean, if I was going to be a Machiavellian, power broker, I would be like, heck yeah, I want everybody to think that there's no ultimate purpose to their existence that is dependent upon a entity that is greater than themselves and has created them with intended purpose. Right? Like, of course, I don't want you to have that self-confidence. I mean, think about that in relation to what we know from a psychological perspective, that if you decrease people's self-esteem, then they become more malleable sheep. If you increase their self-esteem and overall self-confidence, then in general, it becomes more difficult to convince them, to just tell them what to do every time. And like, it's amazing to me how that, like, we're witnessing it in real time right now. Like people are running around being sheep, being told what to do, even though things don't make any sense. It's fascinating to me. Okay, looks like
Such an excellent point, LPP. Such an excellent point.
is it Yacker? Okay, looks like Yacker's joined us. What's up, Yacker? How you doing? Welcome to the stream. Did you see the debate? If so, what are your thoughts on the debate?
Hey,
and then after that, we can get into other things between you and Alec. Go ahead.
yeah. So I did see a lot of the debate there, and I grew up Christian. I am all about believing if you want to believe God exists, created everything, that's great. But my view on it is kind of as Nick said at the end. If you want to believe that God guided the evolution, that I can't disprove that, can't nothing like that. But I think it is a bit short-sighted to say that creatures don't evolve.
Okay, so are you referring to adaptation or macroevolution?
Well, the evolution of creatures, from you can say, well, I guess it depends on what time frame you're wanting to look at, because as I had mentioned with the Galapagos finches, yeah, their beaks changed, but that's only one of the small differences that was made over a relatively short amount of time. Over a more broad amount of time, more small changes creates a different creature.
Okay, so that's a broad assertion that is, number one, not observed, and number two, in relation to the growing amount of knowledge in genetics, the plausibility of those changes is not, is, let's just say it's becoming less and less accepted as being actually achievable without death.
Well, which changes are you saying less plausible without death? Because if you're talking about one organism having offspring that has now a completely different different reproductive system, different circulatory system, yeah, that could cause death. But through generations of breeding, natural selection, then eventually what you end up with is different creatures entirely.
Okay, so you just repeated your first assertion, was that can happen. And okay, so for example, what is the recognized number of amino acids that can be swapped before you lose thermodynamic stability of a protein?
On that, I'm not sure. I don't.
Okay, there's been multiple studies. It's a range between 3 and 15, depending on the protein. So you can have between 3 and 15 before you actually have collapse of the thermodynamic stability of a protein. Okay, so this has been like shown in research. There's peer-reviewed papers on this, right? So in the context of, we just need these very slow changes over time. Well, and look how similar these protein sequences are. Therefore, one must have come from the other. That's the assertions that are made, right? But maybe over the others. There's this genetic sequence is 1,000 amino acids in length, right? And there's only 42 differences. So that shouldn't be a big deal over freaking bazillion years for this to have occurred, right? Well, but hey, wait a minute. The max you can have before you have thermodynamic instability is 15. And in many of them, it's like 3 or 4. So the plausibility of that just like jumps out the freaking window.
So you're saying that many changes in how many generations?
No, I'm saying, okay. you're saying that all the changes don't have to happen in one generation, right?
Correct.
Okay. So you're saying that they slowly change over multiple generations, correct?
Correct.
Okay. So if you don't immediately swap to the correct variation, but you have to somehow get past the errors to regain stability in this modified variation of this pre-existing sequence, right? That's what is claimed in evolutionary theory, that somehow this happens. And what I'm saying is that if you don't have it happen very, very rapidly, then you have failure.
Okay, so my question then would be, you're saying the way that it went from, say fish to land mammals or land animals, right? Because I don't think they went straight from fish to mammals, but breathing underwater to breathing in the air. That's what you're talking about?
No, I'm not even at that level. I'm talking about in the formation of the protein nanomachines that would be necessary to be able to create those overall system changes you're referring to. Like, I don't think you're grasping. I mean, clearly you're not grasping that what you're talking about there and these slowly things happening necessitate the root code level changes that I'm referring to. And what I'm saying is now shown in the freaking lab that 3 to 15 of the amino acid swaps ultimately results in thermodynamic instability of the protein that you're trying to somehow modify, and all the other ones have to be modified in conjunction to ultimately result in this transition from breathing underwater to being able to breathe on land, gills and all that stuff, to lungs, or to breathing on land, and all that, the land-based respiratory system, right? All of those changes necessitate changes to the root source code. Do you accept or reject this?
Well, there would be changes made, and it would be a slow progression. I'm not a scientist. I don't claim to be a scientist. So you start talking, the macro level stuff. That's a little bit beyond what I've researched, right? But as far as there being, fish that can breathe on land, right? Those exist.
Those are called amphibians. Yes.
And they, there's I can't. Let me look real quick. I got to find the name of this animal real quick.
Can be out of water for a little while. You got several different fishes, probably a handful.
Yeah. There's several of them that can, breathe in the air, and
for a short time.
What's that?
For only a short time, though. They'll have to go back in.
Yeah. And through the natural selection of, lowering water levels or lowering sea levels, stuff like that would facilitate a broader range of animals on land. Then through this natural selection, selective breeding, all that stuff, then their offspring that were able to breathe longer on land would have, better access to different foods or, whatever. And so over generation after generation, then through the natural selection of, this particular type, or, whatever type of amphibian is able to reproduce more, sends that genetic sequence down to its offspring. And, after enough generations, then you have different species.
Okay, bro, you have to have, dude, you're talking about passing things on from a heredity perspective. You have to have the source code in the genome in order for it to be passed down. Okay, so you have to have the modifications that would enable this new function to exist prior to it being passed down. So if you're not in the environment, which supposedly is going to have the environmental pressures that are going to result in all this stuff, this selection, how do you have, okay, if you don't have the necessity for it and the modifications to the currently existing mechanisms that would cause you to have lack of fitness before you have the overall function of this brand new deal in this new environment you're not in yet. Like, I mean, this stuff just gets me. Okay, and quick sidebar for all this stuff. Another thing, folks, that people need to pay attention to is, and for those in the audience who understand what a codon is and synonymous codons and how synonymous codons have been used ad nauseum forever to be, you know, supposed proof of evolution. A paper that was just published on the 8th of this month. Synonymous mutations in representative yeast genes are mostly strongly non-neutral. Okay, so for a long time, the conventional paradigm was that synonymous codons proved evolution because you could just do these swaps, no problem, of synonymous codons, and you can that A, that's not negative, and because we're just bringing the same amino acid, and B, this could be a mechanism for how the codon swaps could take place and able to for evolution to be plausible, right? Okay, so I, for quite some time, have been going on diatribes about translational pausing, dual use syntax in the genetic code, and multiplexing, specifically for time variables in the genetic source code, which is being discovered in the way that the ribosome reads the information and then ultimately how it impacts the three-dimensional folding of a polypeptide from an mRNA sequence, information in the mRNA sequence. Okay, what is now being shown is, quote, synonymous mutations in protein coding genes do not alter protein sequences and are thus generally presumed to be neutral or nearly neutral. Here, to experimentally verify this presumption, we constructed 8,341 yeast mutants, each carrying a synonymous, non-synonymous, or nonsense mutation in one of 21 endogenous genes with diverse functions and expression levels, and measured their fitness relative to the wild type in rich medium. 3/4 of synonymous mutations resulted in significant reduction in fitness, and the distribution of fitness effects were overall similar, albeit non-identical, between synonymous and non-synonymous mutations. Both synonymous and non-synonymous mutations frequently disturb the level of mRNA expression of the mutated gene, and the extension of the disturbance partially predicted the fitness effect. Investigations in additional environments revealed greater across-environment fitness variations for non-synonymous mutations than for synonymous mutants, despite their similar fitness function distributions in each environment, suggesting that a smaller proportion of non-synonymous mutants than synonymous mutants are always non-deleterious in changing environment to permit fixation, potentially explaining the common observation for substantially lower non-synonymous than synonymous substitution rates. Okay, so this goes on. Anyway, the point is that we're constantly told that synonymous swaps to enable the ultimate formation of new codons, which actually ultimately result in not a synonymous amino acid, but a variation, which could then explain how you get this new sequence that creates a new function. Well, if you're having a reduction in overall fitness and expression levels, then you have a serious issue. Like, this becomes a serious problem. And then this before you even account for the fact that, oh, wait, there's syntax for how the time-based variables and the other informational elements that are encoded in these sequences somehow formed itself. Like, people are not thinking this through. And the whole going up to the macro level and, oh, well, this, somehow this could happen. Like, you have to go back to the source code. And Yacker, this is why to be honest, I just completely dismiss individuals who want to continue to cling to like higher level morphology stuff. Like, oh, well, this could happen. And like not actually want to address or have a lack of knowledge of the root necessities for these end functions to occur. And so let me ask you a question. After I've got my diatribe, let me ask you a question. Do you think it's remotely plausible that the source code necessary for a 3D printer to print a three-dimensional object, do you think it's remotely plausible that that could ever form itself?
You're talking for a 3D printer that exists in a world or in an environment where the internet already exists, and I'm assuming the 3D printer is already having the program to print things, would it be able to come up with a 3D-dimensional object to print on its own?
Yeah, I mean, obviously we're assuming the 3D printer already exists. Is there any scenario in which you think the source code necessary for the 3D printer to create three-dimensional object is that remotely coherent to think that it could ever form itself?
In this scenario, the internet already exists. There's
Bro, we've already established that. Bro, we've already established that. Is there a remotely plausible scenario in which the source code necessary for a three-dimensional object to be printed by a 3D printer, is it remotely coherent that could ever create itself?
I guess I'm not understanding what scenario you're actually setting up here, because you can set up an AI or a program to automatically print from your 3D printer, and you can set it up to search for updated, whatever.
Wow. Okay, so
schematics.
Okay, bro. Okay, so are you a coder?
I'm not.
Okay. Or have you used 3D printers?
Personally, I have very limited experience with 3D printers.
Okay. So you're trying to, again, we're not talking about whether or not an AI could be created. What's necessary for an AI to be created?
What's necessary for an AI to be created?
Yeah.
Coders to write the code to create the AI.
Okay, so is the AI going to create itself?
Once one exists, then it could potentially create others.
Can the AI in question create itself?
No.
Okay, great. Awesome. So now that we've established that you're clearly dancing, let's go back down to the 3D printer. The G code for a three-dimensional object. That's one of the standard code bases for 3D printing. Can it create itself?
Again, I guess that would just, would it be able to find the information to create that?
How can the file that contains the X, Y, and Z and time access information, the time variable and the element control, if it doesn't exist yet, how is it going to create itself? This is what I'm asking you. How is it plausible for it to create itself? There is no AI, dude, bro. There is no AI to work with. Okay, we're talking about forming just purely the code necessary to be interpreted by the 3D printer to ultimately result in a three-dimensional object.
You're talking about the digital sequencing, the digital code that is all in just basically just numbers, right? It's all just digital electrical signals.
Well, the medium that contains the information is irrelevant, because you can express digital information in a variety of ways. It's not limited to electricity. It used to be punch cards back in the day, and the first computer was built purely mechanical, so that's irrelevant. We're talking about the information necessary, the encoded information necessary for the 3D printer to be expressed and then to create a three-dimensional object. How does that come to be? Can it create itself?
In a world where all of that sequencing, all of that code was just kind of floating around, then it would be potentially capable of producing the code that could be input to produce a 3D object.
Okay, so so number one, you think that ASCII could create itself?
I'm sorry, what's that?
So you think that ASCII or Unicode could create itself and be represented via binary?
If the pieces, if the components of, whatever you're wanting to create, if they're all just scattered around and, intermixed, then there is the potential that the intermixed pieces could potentially fall into just the randomized pattern that would fit what you needed.
So you actually think that the zeros and ones in the appropriate order are going to just randomly sequence themselves following a predetermined syntax?
It wouldn't be
And-
predetermined.
Well, if it's not predetermined, you have nothing but randomness.
Exactly.
But okay, but then you don't have digital information. You don't have digital code if you don't have predetermined syntax and semantics.
Hey, LPP.
Yeah, what's up?
Yeah, can I jump into the Lenski experiment? It has a lot to do with this.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, so the Lenski experiment, far from what people say, because I was doing the same thing at University of Houston as this guy was starting his long-term evolution experiment. And he actually used, he said he grew all the E. coli himself. It's a lie. He used our frozen E. coli from our experiment and several other, I think it's 12 other universities. So we already knew that E. coli could live off of citrate. Okay, not long term, not all of them, but that they could live off citrate. And that's the only thing that came out of that paper was that, oh, we found that, E. coli can live off of citrate. Yeah, but lost every fitness. It could never operate as an E. coli again, as in, what you have in your bowels right now is E. coli that helps in your digestive system to get rid of a lot of the a lot of the mucus and everything that's inside that, so you don't get the polyps and everything else. That's where all these cleanses come in. It ruins your E. coli. It's inside your own body. But, just listening to what's going on, everything was guided by a laboratory. Everything was guided by knowledge that was used off of other papers, off of other, experiments that have been done since probably the 40s. There wasn't much really done during the 20s and all that, but 1940s. So everything was, if you want to say, was created environment. Okay, so you cannot have just an explosion of randomness. You can't even play pool. Pool is not random. If you just have all the balls on the table with the cue ball, and you hit a ball into the rack, okay, and it splits, during your break, okay, that is not random. There's mathematics involved to where exactly you hit that ball, and then it clicks off to every other ball. That's not what the Big Bang was, and everything goes back to the Big Bang for the evolutionists, including this E. coli experiment, because they thought that they could just take these and put them in a certain thing. No. They were given certain foods. Okay, so there was somebody guiding that process. There is nothing on this planet that is not a guided process of any sort, whether it's farming, whether it's a manufacturer, whether it's your classroom that you're learning this stupid evolutionary crap. It's all guided. You have a syllabus, you have rules, you have things that are set in place, what you can and cannot say in classroom, can't chew bubble gum, can't stand up, can't raise your hand, whatever it is, there is no randomness. It's the same thing in the human body with a single cell. All right, you have different cells in your body, and they are not random. They are coded to do certain functions in the body. Now, if you have something go rogue, that's where you get your cancer from. That's where the cell death program happens, where it's switched off, and that has to do with the glucose problem. We found that out. They don't want to know because it cures cancer, and it's a big problem. So it's basically a lot of mess. I'll be really short. So this talk about, just out there with all these chemicals bouncing together and we got a giraffe is just so asinine. It's not even Dr. Seuss level of freaking imagination. And that's my piece.
Well, there's actually in philosophy a principle. It's debated. Don't get me wrong, but it definitely seems to hold water. But it's exactly what you're talking about. It's the principle of sufficient reason, which basically states that there's nothing that happens that doesn't have some sufficient reason or cause for it happening. In fact, it's probably integral to the cosmological argument, but I don't know if that's necessarily the case. But it's certainly integral to this idea of like exactly what you're talking about, right? There isn't such thing as a random occurrence. There's always sufficient cause for that occurrence, and there's sufficient cause for the cause of that occurrence. And provided you had all the information available, which of course we very often don't, but if we did, you'd be able to find in a very scientific manner what those cause and effect relationships are. Now, again, I do understand there are philosophers that don't accept the principle of sufficient reason, but nobody's been able to provide a convincing argument against it, in my opinion. And it does go to show that even in other fields that are non-scientific, we have been able to demonstrate exactly what you're talking about, which is randomness is not, it doesn't appear to be a thing. It appears to be almost like a coping mechanism that human beings use in order to try and like hand wave away things that we don't really understand, right? So like, for example, when you have the cue ball that you were just talking about, we don't know, or most of us at least, I'm sure some nerd does, but most of us don't know all of the different, mathematical quantities and all that kind of stuff that tell us exactly why, the 8-ball went this way and the red solid went that way and all this other kind of stuff. And so we use randomness to explain it, almost like to hand wave it away, because we don't know what's going on. But somebody does know what's going on, and they'd be able to explain to you exactly why it's going on. And so I just thought that was interesting anyway.
LPP, I have a question. Would you ever debate PC Myers or Aces Jr.?
I mean, yeah. I mean, I was supposed to have a debate with Atheist Jr. a couple weeks ago, but his partner backed out.
But you seem like a very smart guy, but you have an IQ of 200.
Nah, not that smart. But
LPP, PC Myers won't debate anybody. He's already tenured. He's doing it with the little freshmen, so they get the good grades and all that stuff. So PC Myers he's a freak. He's a mess. He won't debate because it'll only get him in more trouble. And that's why he doesn't debate anybody. He'll have lectures all day long, but he will not debate anybody.
I heard Kemp wanted to debate him, but he said no.
I see one of the debater from today's debate, Planarwalk, is in the side chat. If you want to join, the link is pinned if you want to come in and talk. But yeah, I don't know. A lot of these folks, it's like, yeah, I debate them, but they generally don't want to actually discuss the root questions, right? Of if you want to just continue to cling to desperately cling to this these positions that things are just so proven and whatnot, but not actually look at the root necessities. I mean, I understand for the PZ Myers and whatnot of the world because they're professional, because of their professional positions, to your point, tenure, etc. What are you going to do? Like, what are you going to do? Get in a debate, get annihilated, then be like, well, I guess you're right. I guess my job is shouldn't. You know what? I don't think my job is.
Look what happened to James Tour. Look what happened to James Tour. He still has his position, but he gets no federal funding. He gets no help from the university. Gets zero. They've totally stripped him of everything. He's just there as a body to keep that post so he can teach the kids.
With James Stewart, they're keeping him because he actually, yes, he's not getting federal funding, but he's bringing in ridiculous amounts of private capital.
Correct.
And all I gotta say is, if you have 4 IPOs in 6 years, and
200 patents,
you're not getting fired, especially when one of them is a method to reduce the cost of Oh crap! I'm having a brain freeze on the chemical.
Carbon.
No, it's not carbon. It's from carbon. It's from carbon, but it's Oh my goodness, how am I having a brain freeze on this? Oh, anyway. Okay. So what's up, Nick? It's Nick, right? Your first name?
Yeah. Ahoy,
Yeah,
how's it going?
Good. Welcome to the stream. How you doing?
I'm doing well. This seems like it will be a little bit calmer than debates, because like in debates you've always got to sort of have responses and stuff, but this seems like it's a chill sort of discussion.
Well, that's very true. You have to, be more focused and be on your A game, of course.
Yeah.
So what? Obviously, you're one of the debate contestants. So, what did you think about the overall debate? What were your thoughts? What stuck out to you?
I didn't like that there are a few questions that I had that didn't get answered. Right. Eventually I sort of stopped pressing a whole lot on because you'll notice that I had that question at the start, which if Kent was able to answer that question in a succinct way, then it would have been that would have actually been game over for me. Like I'd have to concede the debate, but to me, at least, he wasn't able to answer that question in a way that I.
Are you referring to the kind question?
No, I'm actually referring to the. I have it here. What genetic mechanisms prevent macroevolution from occurring over a long time frame?
Well, I mean, one of the things we were discussing before you came in was the. Well, there's multiple things. There's one would be the 3 to 15 max amino acid swaps before loss of thermodynamic stability. That's one. You've got, it's now recognized, there's a paper that came out this year on the dramatic variation from a controlled perspective of mutations in different regions of the genome. So there's like high levels of conservation in very specific areas versus others. And it appears that any modifications, like in the areas like the coding regions, for example, there is dramatically mitigated modifications allowed versus other regions. So you have to overcome that. You have to circumvent some of the other buffers that are in place. You have to overcome the error correction codes. You have to overcome, let's see what else. We have to overcome the dual use syntax problem, multiplex coding. I could go on. Those things would all are major problems to overcome.
And honestly,
the plausibility of macroevolution.
Honestly, that is a far better response. There, like if I had been debating you, like I'd have to step up my game, honestly, because that's a far better response than what Kent gave. For a few of those, I can definitely say that. So the error correcting one, right? So error correcting doesn't, like, once you have a mutation that's if you have a mutation that occurs, just a standard mutation, and that mutation is beneficial, it's not necessarily that mutation will get error corrected, and that's what happens, right? And just in general, you often have these mutations that just don't get corrected for whatever reason. So that would be, I'm not sure that's a good point, but
okay. So first, are you familiar with what error correction codes are?
So from what I remember, it's been a while since I've looked at this particular thing, but from what I remember, it's things that if you have a mutation, then it looks in, basically the cell looks at it and goes, wait, this isn't correct. Let's try and change it back. I think there's like a certain certain thing in your cell which says, okay, this is incorrect, but sometimes it doesn't always work. I may be wrong on that, but that's what I think it is.
You're talking about some of the outcome, not the underlying algorithmic logic. So in communication theory, you've got, and information theory, you've got like Hamming codes, right? Which are error correction algorithms for determining the measuring noise and doing a bunch of other things, but then ultimately interpreting the correct context based on syntax and over semantic values, and then converting it back to the correct one, right? So in organisms like humans, for example, we've got like 50 something different ones that are modifying errors on different levels and different types of information in genetics. And they're doing it in all these different ways, right? So this goes back to my point in relation to the error modifications based on regions of the genome, and how they're now seeing, we thought this would be totally random. It's not. It's actually hyper-controlled. And there is massive amounts of greater error correction in like coding regions versus non-coding regions, for example. And so if you want to argue that, which you did in the debate, that, no more than 8%, I think was the percentage you used, has function in the genome, which I would categorically reject based on most recent information. But even if that's true, then the major problem you have is that the most controlled region of the genome for error correction is the coding region, which is the area that you claim is the only thing that really needs to be accounted for, correct?
Well, so when it comes to, if we want to talk about mutations, right? So there are a couple of different mutations. So you can have mutations that will actually activate regions that are inactive, right? That is one thing that can occur, but that DNA won't necessarily have anything. Like if you remove one of the ends, because you've got the particular end codes that stop the DNA from being read. If you remove that end code and let it just continue on, then it's not necessarily going to be a good thing if you do that. And that was my argument, well, one of my arguments against, I think it's one of my arguments against Kent. So there is that. But it could also be that it might do something useful, right? The particular thing that I was saying here is that if you have a mutation that happens, right? Just a random mutation. Let's say that mutation changes your hair from blue to red. Wouldn't that still count as a mutation? And eventually, it could maybe it might from later on might change to like gray or something in a successive generation, but you needed that first mutation to happen. Would that be subject to error correction or not? I don't think it would be. I feel like it would have evaded the error correction.
So variation, did that create new function?
It's created variation within
a variation of existing function. So do you know what CSS is?
Yes.
Okay. So if I go in and change the color code of a class, does that form a new class?
No.
Okay. So did I modify an existing function or create a new function?
You modified an existing function.
Okay. So if I'm just like now swapping out random zeros in the machine on the machine code level, I'm just now swapping out like random zeros and ones. Do you think that a new class is going to form itself?
You could potentially, like if you're just looking at the CSS, obviously no. But if you're swapping out things from the HTML as well, eventually you could have a new class form itself.
Okay. So do you think that in swapping out random zeros and ones that are going to both affect the HTML and the CSS. Do you think that the overall class and whatever is being done for the HTML is going to break before or after something new comes that actually works?
So if you're doing it to just one instance, right? It's probably going to break first.
It's gonna,
right?
well, let's be honest. It's going to break real fast, right?
Yeah, but if you
Okay, hang on. So it's going to break really, really quick. Okay, cool. I'm glad we established that. So if with the other point I made about the 3 to 15 amino acid swaps where you have thermodynamic instability, is that the direct equivalent to what I'm talking about now with the HTML and CSS?
in a way, it could be.
Okay, so if the if the protein will no longer form correctly, right, or the polypeptide that's being created will no longer fold properly, how are you going to, from a fitness perspective, how is it actually plausible that you're somehow going to be able to overcome all of that over this long successive time frame, right? Because like for you or I, if we're like creating a new class or you're making quick mod or whatever you're doing, right, in your code, you do it all really quick before, and then you save, and then you upload the new file, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So you're sure as hell not going to like do part of it and then upload it to the live server, are you?
No, gonna
Right.
do it all at once.
Right.
But
okay. So, hang on. So if from a, do you agree or disagree that from an evolutionary perspective, you have to observe this from a source code modification perspective?
I think that there are some big differences, right? So when it comes to modifying source code, right? One of the huge things is you're just working with one instance, right? If you're working with it's like I've made programs that do random things. If you make a program that does a whole lot of random things, you're going to choose the best one if you want to show it off, you're going to choose the best one. You're not going to choose one that's completely broken, right? And I think that's more analogous, because if you've got something that's 50 different things, and this is often used in machine learning, right, where you'll have a whole lot of randomly initialized things, and the one that has the best fitness out of all that, well, that one will be used as a template for the next one. And eventually you have something like, if you're training cars to go around a 2D track in a game or something, right, you'll have one, initially they'll all be crashing into the walls, but eventually you're going to have cars that will go further and further and further. I think that's far more analogous.
Right. So in order to enable machine learning, do you have to initially have accounted for all sorts of different variables prior to being able to execute, and then ultimately have the AI conduct the machine learning to find which is the best?
Yeah, you do have to account for a lot of different variables, but
okay, hang on. So you have to account for initially, right? And how were you able to account for those variables initially?
It depends what type of thing you're doing. Like for machine learning, because it's generally a neural network, you just got to set up that neural network and then let it run, make sure that it has that it's going to produce the output that you are looking for.
Right.
Or similar output to what you're looking for.
Right. Hey, LVP, I gotta go. Just want to say bye to everybody. CJ, Yacker, it was nice meeting you guys. Planarwalk, you'll get there one day, and praise God. Have a great day.
Have a good one, Alec. Good to see you.
God bless you.
God bless.
Right. So, but hang on, man. So I think you may be missing the point. So I agree with most of what you just said in terms of what you have to do. Although I think a lot of the AI stuff and what other neural nets are not being as successful as I hoped. But our version of them. I mean, but you had to have previous knowledge of the intended objective, correct?
Well, yeah, you had to set something up, like so that it could do that. Is essentially, I think that's what you're going for. You have to set something up so that it can actually do that. Is that your argument there?
Well, that's part of it, but you also had a preceding intended outcome objective, correct?
If I could,
Yes.
so you're going based off of you in a limited scope trying to get a desired effect, whereas the evolution theory, the basis of it, you're talking, back at the beginning of life, whatever. That is a global scope, and it just is all of those pieces and components that are happening all continuously, all at once. It's not with any predisposed ideas about what's going to be created.
Okay, you're missing the point. So Planarwalk tried to use machine learning as being analogous to evolution. And the point that I'm making is that in order for machine learning to actually have any kind of reasonable expectation of success, you have to have a preceding intended outcome objective. And you have to account for all sorts of different variables on the front end before you even account for how the source code exists in the first place to achieve all this. Right now we're talking about adaptation. You have to have those things accounted for and checksums and everything else that are going to go into place in order to, and overall fitness functions, in order to achieve the end outcome that is just being taken for granted in this context as somehow being able to be achieved. And
Well,
nobody in the evolutionary camp claims that those intended outcomes were already in place. They're actually they formally reject that from the biological evolution perspective. So my point is that, and by the way, there's papers on this in relation to like using evolutionary algorithms for function, all this kind of stuff. Like there's papers on this that actually showcase there's a plateau from a adaptation of pre-existing function to versus a leap to new function. There's papers on this. There's one published last year on the exact topic about how this is not actually plausible to take place. But my point is that you can't go and use human created machine learning and AI that has all of these teleological implications and then somehow apply that to make evolution plausible on the biological sense.
I think that there is a slight difference. There are certain like you did actually say one of the things that I was going to say. So there are slight differences. So for evolution, there is like technically there is a fitness thing, but that fitness thing arose because of competition, right? It's not. Whereas when it comes to machine learning, the fitness score that you assign things, well, that's due to you giving it a particular fitness score because you want an outcome. Evolution doesn't really want an outcome, but it turns out that if you are better at surviving than all the other things, well, that's going to means that you're more likely to survive and reproduce. That's can be seen as you can assign meaning to that, but the difference there is when it comes to evolution, the evolutionary fitness score is something that we can say, okay, there's meaning to that post it happening, whereas when it comes to AI, it's before we do anything that we assign meaning to it, if that makes sense.
Well, I mean, you just agreed with the point I was making, but I'm saying that the plausibility, or what I said about the assertions that are being made, I'm saying that the plausibility of the same outcome being actually plausible without the preceding objective, that's what you're avoiding. And when you factor in the growing recognized reality that the coding that's necessary for biological systems to exist, I mean, is insane in the level of intricacies, variables, and overall, complexity. I mean, it's just insane. And then we think that somehow randomly formed itself. That doesn't make any, to me, that doesn't make any coherent sense, unless you're willing to argue that a machine learning system can create itself without the necessity of a preceding intelligent agent. Unless you can plausibly make that argument, I don't understand why people defend evolutionary theory.
I think you're still.
Sorry, I was going to say that I think that there is because right now you're talking about more abiogenesis. Like abiogenesis would be setting all that up. When it comes to the so using the machine learning thing, abiogenesis would be you set up the code to be able to do all the fitness stuff, and you set up the neural network. Whereas when it comes to evolution, well, evolution is just letting it run and see what comes of it.
I mean, you can go that route if you want to. I'm saying that now with what we're discovering in relation to interdependent. Okay, so for example, inter and intra chromosomal gene regulation. You actually think that that's something that can just happen by random chance? And we'll run enough variables and somehow we'll have three-dimensional time-based regulation necessities, and otherwise you don't have all of these functions that get executed? You think that formation is actually plausible?
I mean, if it helps it survive, the organism survive, then I can see how that would come about, especially seeing as that can be used to prevent things like cancer in the organism. If you've got these things that stop too many genes from changing, that's what I'd say that error correction codes.
No. I'm talking about I'm talking about for gene expression.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Okay. So I have to have for transcription factory zones and stuff, right? So we have to have a chromosome fold over to the appropriate position of another chromosome in order for expression of genes that are not necessarily in linear order in relation to it. And if you don't have that, you have insert crazy disease, right? That kills you if you don't have this. So
yeah,
we're talking about from a plausibility perspective. You don't have the chemical linear proximity in order for this to happen because it's not proximate. That's the whole point. And then you have to have the three-dimensional folding mechanisms that are, and now we're finding out things like short tandem repeats are the hinges that enable a lot of these three-dimensional folds to take place in order for the expression of digital information in sequences in another freaking chromosome. So your answer to that in the plausibility of it is it benefited the organism, therefore it happened. That's like saying that an include you need to call over is appropriately is in the correct folder over here, and then the command is inserted into the code to call from this folder to bring in this chunk of code in order to based on this variable in order to express and have this end outcome, and that just happened because it benefits things. Do you not see the amount of imagination that requires from a plausibility perspective?
Well, it's one of them things where it does, when you put a lot of things together, it can seem quite implausible. It's like looking at a game, right? So if someone's developed a game, especially if they've developed it by themselves, and you look at all the code, it's how did they develop all this? It would take an insane amount of brain power to foresee that you're going to need all of that. Whereas in reality, it comes down to building it module by module, right? So you'll start with something simple, right? Maybe a text-based sort of thing to make sure certain functions work. and then you'll go ahead and build on top of that. And in a way, evolution is like the same thing. It will start with something simple, right? Something that just simply works, right? It may not work it may not be completely optimal, but it just works well enough to survive and reproduce. In evolution, then things will get added on as more mutations happen throughout the population, and some mutations will be extremely beneficial, right? And that will be things that will be added on. Eventually, you'll get to things where because these kinds of things that you're talking about are needed for at least life that we have today, eventually those things get added on, maybe not all at once, but because we're looking at it as it is today, we're not looking at it as it was, 2 billion years ago or anything. We're looking at it as it is today. It seems very complicated and seems like, it can't have just been evolved. Whereas if you were to break it down and go, okay, well, this part here, that could have actually come from this certain thing here, then it becomes a lot more simple.
Okay. Like I said, I think you are applying a lot of sci-fi creative imagination in that from a plausibility perspective actually taking place when we know that you have to have things in specific locations in specific order in order for the end outcomes to you're downplaying, right? These little modules, right? The modules are hyper specific, just like the end script that has been written for a specific function in the overarching system, right? So you're also having to somehow explain how the overall, let's say you're using the MVC framework, right? Like, how did that create itself? Like, if you don't have the complete system, then you can't use it to, even if you want to create little modules as you're going along. But if you're using a framework, you still have to have the preceding complete framework in order to be utilized to modularly create out the end system, correct?
Yeah, well, that would be like the framework to be able to create that would be abiogenesis, right? Or are we going to you have to?
Well, evolution supposedly starts with a self-replicating molecule is the current position.
Yep.
Right. So at some point you have to get. I mean, do you agree or disagree that all organisms operate on a universal code framework?
Pretty much, yeah. I'll agree with that.
Okay. So we have a universal code framework. So somehow that must exist, and somehow that evolved, correct?
Well, I think you're looking at a completed thing or a working thing and saying, oh, this is made specifically this way. It had to have been created this way.
That's not what I'm saying.
Instead of looking at it and saying, and looking at it instead of looking at it, saying,
that's not what I'm saying.
This is the one that worked.
Okay. Yaker, you just need to keep your mouth shut, bro. You don't understand basic code and information communication theory. Planarwalk does, so that's why I'm talking with them. I'm not talking about my position. I'm asking how it is plausible for this, regardless if it's the one that ends up getting selected. How is it actually plausible for the overarching framework to create itself? Is the whole point. Because you have to have syntax, semantics, and pragmatics. It must somehow come to be, and you must have source and target alphabets in order and extent and overall semantic value assignments in code mapping in order for this to exist. Like, this is unavoidable reality. You must account for this. So I want to know, what is the plausible explanation for that to evolve? Because, I mean, please explain to me how source and target alphabets create themselves. That's what I want to know.
Yeah. So that is one thing where. So this is abiogenesis. That seems we're talking about now.
No, this is evolution, because everybody says that it can come very slowly and it doesn't have to all exist at one time. It's part of evolution. And at some point in the past with protocells and such, while evolution is taking place, that somehow this evolved itself. Okay, so I'm not talking about abiogenesis. I'm
Yeah.
talking about evolution, because this falls under evolution. So
Well,
I want to
if you're
know
talking
how does, and then you extrapolate that out to the we can have, we don't have to have like the multiplex coding aspect of the genetic code, right? With translational pausing and all those kind of variables they're finding out. The triplet of triplet codes in terms of the overall, the adjacent codons having relevance to polypeptide formation, right? Like those are things that have to be addressed because they freaking exist. And somehow, according to your camp, they evolved. So I want to know how code mapping from a multiplex code perspective, I want to know how that takes place from your evolutionary model.
Well, it's one of the things where, so if we're not talking about abiogenesis, right? If something has, if you've got let's say you've got something that, let's talk about if you've got SOX, do you know of SOX9 on chromosome 17?
I don't. What is that?
Okay, it's basically a chromosome, or basically a gene that is responsible for producing testicles, right?
Okay.
Then there is NR0B1, right? And
bro, you're dancing around the question. I don't care. We're talking about completed gene sequences. I'm talking about the root evolution of what enables those sequences to exist.
Yeah, so if we're talking about the root thing, that's more about abiogenesis. It really does sound like that, because if we're talking about like, CTG produces means this protein, right? Then it's like, okay, well, that's something that it's like, why? It's more about why is it that way, and I don't know why it's that way. It just so happened to be that way.
Right, but I'm asking you you're a coder, correct?
Yeah.
Okay, and I'm assuming you understand the basics of information and communication theory as a coder, correct?
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm assuming you know what code mapping is from a source and target alphabet perspective.
To an extent, yes.
Okay, and every higher level language has syntax, right? But then that gets obviously translated down into the machine code, correct?
Yes.
Okay. So the extensions of an alphabet, that's what I'm talking about from evolutionary perspective. You want to argue that we won't discuss like the origination, that's fine. But the models that are in place for evolution claim that you don't have to have the entirety accounted for from the beginning in order for all this to work, for biological evolution to be taking place. So what I'm asking you is, how is it remotely plausible without an intelligent agent for semantic values to be code mapped into a syntax, and for this to be also have time-based control variables that are somehow didn't exist, but then over time create themselves? This is what I'm talking about. I want to know how that actually takes place from a realistic plausibility perspective, when you're claiming there is no predetermined search function that has been inserted into this to achieve an end outcome. I want to know how you actually think that this is plausible to take place. Because, and if you think it's plausible, I would love for you to explain to me how you think that could happen from a coding perspective of what you do.
So it's one of them things where when you're looking at these things, it's easy to we as humans tend to provide meaning to these things, whereas it just so happened to be that there was all this stuff that could be viewed as a framework, right? It's like, why is we can ask things like, why does hydrogen bond to this? Why does hydrogen bond to oxygen to give us water? It's like, water is very important, and it just so happened that happens. And it's like, well, yeah, I guess, but that's us providing meaning. We just so happen to be here because of that, right? If it was different, yeah, we wouldn't be here. But when it comes to these things in code, when it comes to our genetic code, it just so happens that certain certain things code for particular proteins, right? And those particular proteins end up producing life as we know it.
Bro, does the codon chemically interact directly with the amino acid it represents?
Not sure.
Okay, well, the answer is no. The codon never chemically interacts directly with the amino acid. So, like, that's just it just so happens, like, it doesn't chemically interact. You have an adapter, right, in the tRNA. So you have codon, anticodon. Codon never interacts with the amino acid. And you can reprogram them to carry different amino acids, right? So we've done this. So you're talking about digital information in the real sense, not analogous in a literal sense. You do recognize that, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So we're back to code mapping. You either have just random code mapping for semantic information values that just happens magically, randomly. That's what I want explained.
Well, yeah, like if you have random code mapping, then you're going to have things that's okay, like it picks this particular thing for this particular thing, right? If you've got like, let's say GGT, right? I'm not sure what amino acid that is for, right? But it could, like, if you're setting it up as you could set it up randomly, right? It doesn't. It's like saying it's like language, right? All the stuff that we say. It's if I say the word likely, that I just decided that was going to mean likely, or person a long time ago decided that that's going to mean the meaning that we assign it today. It's didn't have to be that. We could have chose something else.
Right. It could be arbitrary. It's arbitrary, right?
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
So, but what was necessary for the arbitrary value assignment?
What do you mean?
Okay, so do you the English language? You have the base alphabet, right? There's 26 letters in the base alphabet, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Then you can, based on different extensions, i.e., organization of those letters, you can then have a word, right?
Yeah.
Okay, and then you assign a value to the word.
Yes.
Okay, so there's multiple values that are assigned to it. So in this context, what you're hearing is me actually the values, a combination of the value assignments, i.e. the sound assignments that we've made to each individual letter. And then in this sequence, they sound this way. So my vocal cords are in my brain my brain is sending signals to my vocal cords to encode a certain amount of vibrations that are equal to that word. But then you have to know, when you hear them, you have to have base knowledge of the root code, and then obviously the extensions of it, right, into words and sentence and everything, the grammar and the syntax. And you also have to know the value assignment, the semantic value assignment that's been assigned to that sequence of base letters of the alphabet. Correct?
Yeah.
Okay, so the exact same thing that happens in coding, like in a higher level language, right? You have all these different commands that exist in the code, right? In the code language. Now they're using the English alphabet, but the language is different based on the syntax and semantics and the code mapping that's been taking place on the root level for that overall code base. Correct?
Yes.
Okay, so you have to account for that exact same logic in the genetic code. So is there any scenario in which the semantic value assignment for the extension of the English code of the word likely what is necessary in order for that semantic value assignment to take place?
Well, obviously there's reference to other words. Like if you don't have other words to be able to convey what likely means, well, if I say something is likely, so what does that? You need other words there in order to produce that word, but then you need
Well,
the letters.
I'm not even talking. I'm not talking about the pragmatics at this point, which would be the contextual stuff. I'm talking about just the sheer root. We're just taking likely by itself, and for the value assignment of both the sounds and the meaning of those sounds in conjunction. In this kind, likely, like the probability of, or it's probably going to happen, those kind of things, right? For that's the meaning of likely.
Yeah.
For that meaning to be assigned, what was necessary?
Well, for that meaning to be assigned, it had to have some kind of use in our language, right?
Yeah, but I'm talking about what are the agents that are necessary for that to take place? Is there always going to be an agent necessary for that to take place?
Depends. Like what we're talking about when it comes
for the root value assignment of. Okay, are you actually dodging like this, bro, or are you not understanding?
I'm trying to
because I feel like you're really dodging right now because you're clearly not dumb. So let's put it in a different context. So the voltage impulses in your computer and the representation of 0 and 1 based on that, and then the overall extension of those combinations to be representative of a command, right? That's just electricity or not electricity, depending on which one, going through a gate, right?
Yep.
Okay. Is the meaning of those impulses, which are representative of zeros and ones, which are ultimately extrapolated out into ASCII, Unicode, all the way up to a higher level language, right? Are those value assignments, what is necessary for those value assignments all the way down on the root level in your actual processor?
There has to be something there to know what it means. Like you have to have something to change it from, electrical impulses into, it's always electrical impulses, but you basically need something to translate it from zeros and ones to something that's recognizable on a screen.
Okay, cool. So do you actually think it's remotely plausible that the random reassignment of those impulses, so they're an SSD or whatever, the way they're stored, the charges, the way they're stored and bunch on, do you actually think that the random rearrangement of things, even with a ridiculous amount of time, is going to somehow go from Hello World to whatever the latest version of Apple OS is, or Windows 11 or whatever it is? Do you think it's actually plausible that could ever happen, even if you had a ridiculous amount of time available to you, that rearrangement of those molecular positions on an SSD is going to result in a new program on that level? Even with slow modular changes and rearrangement of these zeros and ones, do you actually think that's going to happen? That's remotely plausible.
I mean, if you have enough of these things happening, then it is possible. You've heard of the monkeys on a typewriter, right?
Yeah, I've heard of monkeys on a typewriter. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, I got to cut this off because I'm late. My girlfriend's been waiting on me for a while. I got to go. If we're now at the position, bro, like this for me is yet another example of people in favor of evolution are desperate, bro. Like you just actually said that you think with enough changes that Hello World could turn itself into like Windows 11. Like I honestly I really want you to go and talk to some of your code buddies and actually think and ask them if they actually think that's plausible, and tell them like, hey, you guys can all be fired and like quit your jobs. Like go to Microsoft headquarters and be like, I think all the devs can leave now because Windows 12 is going to create itself from a random rearrangement of hey, we're going to keep installing Windows 11 we're going to delete it. We're going to keep copying it, downloading it, and then reinstalling it. And
there is a difference.
Windows 12 is going to create itself. Like this is hilarious.
There is a difference between plausible and practical. Obviously, it is impractical to do that, right? But plausible, if you've got enough time, then yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
I mean, that's what machine learning is, right?
Bro, you have to. Oh my god,
dude! Time to change. Bro, if you have things randomly change.
Dude, if you have machine, okay, we already established this regarding machine learning earlier, in terms of what is required in order for the end outcome to take place. Okay, So you're completely, and I honestly, again, let's go back to this. Are you willing? I will, dude. You're in New Zealand, right?
Yes, I am.
Do you want to fly to? Let's fly to where Microsoft's headquarters is, Zane Weapon, Washington. Let's fly up there and go meet with them and be like, hey, do you guys think you could create an AI that will form the next version of, like, form Windows 12, and with no through machine learning, we're going to create entirely new version of the OS. Dude, they will look at you and laugh in your face. It would be hilarious. I guarantee you don't have the balls to actually go do that and actually mean it. Like,
well, there's a difference between practicality and
dude, you just said with enough time. You just said with enough time. You just said with enough time that could happen. And I'm telling you, I would love to see you go. Like, let's fly up there and do it. Let's do this on video, bro. It'll be hilariously watched. Like, there is no. They will laugh. They will laugh so hard. Be like, what? You think the new version of the OS is going to create itself through machine learning with enough time? Like, no, not even coherent. I mean, I really don't think you're actually thinking this through, man. So you okay?
I mean, people are trying to literally create sentience through machine learning. Not going well.
They're trying and they're failing miserably. And in spite of the Google guy who claims they've already created sentience, which is hilarious. And I mean, it's recognized that special intelligence versus general intelligence are entirely different context, by the way. I'm assuming you know that, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So what's your point then? Why are you even bringing it up? If we're we're failing miserably, and B, the concepts of like general intelligence is not even in the same stratosphere, and then a special intelligence function is like really freaking good at whatever it's doing, but that's it.
Well, if we do a manner, like, because we are trying to achieve general intelligence, right? Not going well, right? But it is one thing that if we do achieve general intelligence, then it is entirely possible that could decide to write the next Windows.
Okay, right. So if we manage to create general intelligence that can write something, what is necessary for the new thing that got created?
Well, obviously the framework for the AI.
And what was necessary for that to exist?
Well, because humans created it, right? Obviously, humans needed to create it, but that's like abiogenesis, right? The initial conditions are there for it to be able to be created.
Right. Okay. But going back to the point I was making earlier about all of the error correction mechanisms and the restrictions on modifications that we observe, like, so you're saying that, oh, well, if this exists, then and you have general intelligence, then you might be able to create new stuff. However, we're observing all these buffers and things that are in place to prevent these massive modifications from taking place, but they must have taken place at some point, even though we don't really observe the plausibility of that now. That must have been what happened in order for this to happen. And when there definitely wasn't an intelligent agent necessary for these modifications to happen at all. Like, that's my whole point, is like, you're making these gigantic leaps of faith in order for this to actually be plausible, while simultaneously conceding that in the scenario you're referring to, in order for that to take place, you would have to have massive amounts of information input into the information system, into the AI, in order for this end outcome to happen. You have to have external input of all of this information in order to get to that point, to achieve these next leaps.
Well, it's because there are slight differences here, right? So there is a slight difference.
Hang on, you go. You guys can go.
I get that you got to go. Yeah,
you guys can talk for a little bit longer. I got to hop on the road. I'll end. If you guys want to keep talking, I can end it from my phone when you guys keep going. So, welcome to the stream. I got to bounce, guys. Appreciate everybody in the audience for doing it and being here. Good talk with you, Planarwalk. I'll see you guys later.
Hey, really quick, because I actually am going to have to go to actually two things. First thing, I'm going to go ahead and just shamelessly plug. If anybody's interested, I got an episode of my Hogsmeade series coming up in about 5 minutes talking about the history of Ascension. So definitely check that out. But Planarwalk, would you by chance be interested in a debate on dinosaurs and man living together, or the whole dinosaur dragon relation concept? I'm not super big on science per se, but that's one that has a lot to do with other things like history and stuff like that. So it's one that I feel could probably be a good conversation, and I feel like you might be a good blocker for that. But would you be interested in something like that?
Yeah, I'd have to take a look into it first. Like, would have to do an exchange first because I'm not super up to date on that. Where we just see me what the evidence that you're going to present is, and I'm going to have to, because otherwise it's just going to be me going into it being like, oh, I didn't know that. I don't know what to respond with, you know?
Right. Absolutely. Well, yeah, if you do end up, looking into it and being interested, I definitely would be interested in having a talk with you. You seem like a pretty intelligent person, so that's, obviously the main thing to have is honesty and intelligence. And so, yeah.
And I just want to say, Planar or Nick, I've never heard of you before, but I was looking up your channel since I got here, and it looks like you've got some really good stuff. So I subscribed.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, like we may disagree on I'm not sure what side of the evolution versus.
Yeah, I'm atheist. I'm not a creationist.
Oh, okay. Yeah. I don't just tackle creationism. Like sometimes it's people saying that 1 + 1 = 1. It's like, yeah, in some contexts you can have 1 + 1 = 1, like Boolean logic, for example. But in general, like you can't just say 1 + 1 = 1 because magnet.
Well, I do see you've got some videos dealing with flat earthers, and I don't know how you do it. I don't know how you stomach through it, but more power to you. Because
flat earth.
Well, I was just going to say the few flat earthers I've talked to, it was like insufferable.
Oh yeah, like flat earthers definitely aren't the most intelligent people out there. Like some of them do have interesting arguments that make you think about things that you haven't really thought about. And like I probably got better at thinking about science due to looking into flat earth claims, but at the end of the day, they are wrong.
Yeah. Well, it feels weird that John left the stream and left it open, so I guess Sal's the boss.
Well, no, I don't have any moderation things. I mean, I'm a young Earth creationist, but I think Kent Hovind's a charlatan. So I'm kind of against both of the people who debated. So I think both of you lost.
Wow. Would you ever debate Kent Hovind?
Oh yeah. I'll tell you the first thing I'd debate him on. It's like, sir, you said your ex-wife Cindy Lincoln, when she was confronted with a Steve Lynn, she claimed that he was armed. And Kent Hovind came out and defended him and said, no, that was Steve Lynn's private parts in his right pocket kind of expanding. And I'm like, yeah, the guy just makes up stuff for the moment. I was like, how are you going to defend that? When I heard it from his own mouth, I said, this guy's a liar. He'll make up anything he wants to just to persuade his audience and keep his people in line. A lot of his creationism, to the extent that it's good, it's because he got it from someone else who's actually good. It's not original material.
I have to ask you, Sal, have you gotten backlash for your views and criticisms of Kent Hovind?
Maybe just look in the side chat, see if anyone's backlashing at me.
Sal,
so Redefine Living says, so now we need to listen to Sal slander. Okay, did I just say, all right, you can look up that thing about Kent Hovind explaining the gun in Steve Lynn's right pocket. Do you believe that? Is that slander?
Right, yeah.
Hey, come on, guys.
Everything you said did not come off as slander to me. It just came off as, well, more of an observation report than anything.
Sal, I subbed to your channel.
Oh, thank you, sir.
Right.
Thank you, sir.
And
Yeah, I mean, someone's saying South slander. Is that okay, guys? Why don't you defend that? Do you want to defend that? Do you want to try to go through the geometry and the hydraulics of how that's possible?
Well, man, we could have talked about that on our stream we did a couple weeks back, but maybe another time, because I could imagine you getting a lot of heat coming from the young Earth creationist community, because you do consider yourself a young Earth creationist, right? Just to make sure I'm not
Absolutely
making stuff up. Okay, yeah.
But
so I can definitely imagine getting heat.
It doesn't reflect well on the community when you have someone advertising himself as a man of God. He's been married 4 times married to 4 different wives in 5 years. That's not above reproach. You have 42 count convictions of tax evasion, 1 count of domestic violence, and several restraining orders against you. And then you're caught making up stories that are so obviously lies, such as the gun in Steve Lynn's pocket. Okay, maybe he shouldn't be on our team. People have said I'm jealous of him. No, I'm not. If I were to be jealous of someone, it would be someone like Rob Stadler, Harvard, MIT PhD, who has saved millions of lives by his inventions that are implanted heart implants. And he's a young Earth creationist. Or Dr. John Gideon Hartnett, who has several PhD students, created the most stable sapphire-controlled clocks for the European Space Agency. He's a young Earth creationist. Or John C. Sanford, who saved billions of lives through his genetic improvement techniques. And he's a young Earth creationist. He was an atheist. He became a Christian and then a creationist. If I were to envy people, it would be someone like that. It wouldn't be someone who goes around saying, oh, the guy who threatened my wife with a gun, that really wasn't a gun. It was his private parts in his right pocket. All right? That's just stupid. Young Earth creationism doesn't need clowns like that on our team.
Yeah, I'm sorry to bring up Godwin's law, or to invoke Godwin's law, but it'd be like saying, "Oh, you bring up something against Hitler, right?" And then someone says, "Oh, you're just jealous of Hitler." It's like, no, I actually think Hitler was a bad person. I wouldn't actually want to be like. There are far better world leaders than Hitler out there that are better to look up to.
Oh, as much as and we LPP did say to keep the attacks, even though I don't really necessarily feel like you're attacking Kent, but maybe we should go to a different topic. But this is a topic I'd love to talk to you about on another stream.
Oh, sure, we could do that.
Yeah, because
all right, we can talk science then. So I honor LPP's request.
So
one of the things that
what do you think of LPP said the DNA's code?
I think that's not the most precise language, and he and I have had arguments about that. I'd say DNA is the material that implements part of the material that implements the genetic code. So everyone uses the shorthand. Even Richard Dawkins, who's an atheist Darwinist, he says DNA is a code. That's really, if we're going to be charitable and say, okay, that's just a shorthand, let's not take it exactly as the exact meaning that it really means to say DNA is a substrate that is used to implement the genetic code. That is the most accurate thing to say. So if John says John Maddox says DNA is a genetic code, DNA is a code. A stickler would probably get after that and say, that's just not true. Someone giving it a more charitable reading will understand it the way I explained it, and then it's correct. So I just avoid all of that and just say, the thing that he's trying to demonstrate is that it's improbable.
He says here, I never said DNA is a code. Let's not mistake what I said. That's what he said.
Well, those are from his other shows where he said DNA is a code. And I would just say,
at least...
go on.
Oh, sorry. I was just gonna say, from what it seems like, he was using like code analogously, using it analogously to computer code.
So hang on, hang on. So I'm not sure who the hell is misrepresenting me, but I have never stated that DNA is the code. I have done presentations out the freaking wazoo on how it's the medium. I've made fun of people who claim it is the DNA itself, deoxyribonucleic acid, is actually the code. I've talked about the organization of the base pairs. I've done entire streams. I've even bet money on this whole deal. So anybody who's misrepresenting me as saying that needs to apologize immediately, because I have never said that. I've actually made many videos. You can go look on my channel at the plethora of videos, but I have discussed this ad nauseum. I've even made people use the analogy of you could have a box of wood that has wood letters in the box. Nobody would argue that the box, just because it's made of wood, is the same, and the letters are both made of wood, that there's not a differentiation between the letters and the box, the medium that contains it therein. So anybody want to retract those statements?
John, you went after godless engineer. You said DNA is not a code, so I just assumed you had the opposite view. I'm sorry if I misunderstood you. So I'm happy to retract that. That's the way I understood it when you went after.
Sal, are you having a memory issue? Because you and I have had many conversations about this.
I might be having a memory issue.
I mean, there's many streams where we have discussed this. I even did an entire presentation about this exact concept because I got so irritated with people continuing to make that now make that differentiation, and atheists using it as a way to circumvent the whole root code problem by being, oh well, it's just DNA, it's not it's not a code. Like, so I'm kind of confused, Sal, to be honest. Like, you know this. What's going on, buddy?
I thought there was a video that said DNA is not a code. That was godless engineer, and so he was kind of the whipping boy. So if that's not your view, I'm sorry. So you asked for a retraction. I'm making one now, sir.
To be fair, Ed, I thought the same thing originally until hearing LPP talk about it more in feature videos, because that was the impression that I got until I started listening to his stuff. Then I was like, oh, okay, he's not saying it's necessarily a code; it just contains code, or however you want to phrase it.
Because I actually thought godless
honestly, Sal, I'm kind of stunned, to be honest, brother. I feel like you're categorically misrepresenting me, and I'm kind of pissed off at you because you have zero excuse to not know my position. You monitored. You literally were a moderator in my debate with godless engineer, if I remember correctly. And
no, I was not a moderator.
Which one of my debates were you? I know I was Smokey. There was another one. You were my in Erica, right? And we went into great detail about this whole topic. And like, you've been on my streams, man. Like, I know you have issues with the whole information and code argument, and you like the structure, the three-dimensional structure problem, which I agree with. You know, I agree with you on this. But I'm just really confused as to this, man. Like, I'm really confused.
If I might misunderstood you, I'm glad you're asking me to retract. I'll just retract right now. So I don't know what else to say. I mean, that was the best understanding. The reason I remembered it that way is I was adamant that DNA is not a code. It's not the best way to say it. I'd say DNA is the substrate that is used, one of the substrates used to implement the genetic code. So the genetic code is a code, and DNA is some of the substrate that is used to implement it. So,
of course it is. What I'm questioning is how you are somehow confused that that's not my position. That's what I'm confused about. Like, I mean, I agree with you that it's substrate. I mean, I get all that, but I'm just saying, like, given the ridiculous number of videos, debates, and conversations we've had on this topic, you and I even had a whole stream where we discussed the information problem and went into this in great detail. Like, so I'm really just confused as to how you think I'm somehow not operating from the same position.
Well, because I thought godless engineer was actually formally correct, but not connotationally correct.
Right.
So
but he made the in my video that he was making that connotation in response to. I actually made the clear distinction in that video about the genetic code versus DNA. I'd made the specific delineation about the genetic code because I was making fun of atheists who seem incapable of grasping the distinction. But in the context of responding to me a few minutes ago, or putting it in context of me, you said that I was wrong about that, or that I was making a different position about the DNA in general versus the genetic code being housed in the DNA. That's why I'm just so confused as to somehow my interpretation of it, or my position on it being somehow confused. We're not talking about godless engineers. I'm not talking about godless engineers' position. I'm talking about the position you made in relation to what my position is.
Oh, hey, LPP, he just left.
Okay, cool. Well, in that line, the stream is over. Appreciate everybody coming. You guys want to have last words, and then we'll end it so I can get out of this traffic.
Yeah, well, have a good night. I'm out.
I have a question.
Take care, everyone.
LPP.
No questions, just last words, buddy.
Okay. Have a good day. Sorry about that.
No problem.
Bye.
Yep.
Nick, I appreciate you joining the stream, and everybody for coming in and watching. Hope everybody has a good one and has a great night, and we'll see you next time.